Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, can we have roll call? Rebecca?
Director Underhill,
He's here.
Director Ratterman,
Here.
Director Davidson.
Here.
Director Thomas.
I'm here.
President Takeda.
And I'm here also. Thank you. All right, public comment. At this time, members of the public may address the board on any non-agendized item. The public is encouraged to work through staff to place items on the agenda for board consideration. No action can be taken on matters not listed on the agenda. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Anybody online, Rebecca?
We do have people online, but
Any comment?
No.
You guys okay? Okay, so seeing no public comment, let's move on to item number 3, consent agenda. Following items are expected to be routine, non-controversial. Items will be acted upon by the board at one time without discussion. Any board member may request that any item be removed for later discussion. Have a motion?
Move for approval.
Second. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Consent agenda passes. New business, item 4A, discussion direction regarding cost of service and rate design analysis. That's, yeah.
Jeff's in the front row.
I gave up my Bob Euchre seat. Good morning, good afternoon, Madam President, members of the board. I'll be brief with my introduction. As you're aware, we are conducting our five-year rate study, rate analysis. And this is a study that's required particular knowledge and information and skills in the rate setting process. We go through a cost of service study, financial requirements, ultimately build to what is the revenue requirements and what are the needs for this district. One thing I want to make sure everybody knows, we're going into this with no predetermination of what our rates are going to look like at the end of the study. The numbers will be what they are, but every step along the way, we're going to be engaging your board and the public in how we go through each iterative step of this rate setting process. This is my third study with the district, 2013, 2018, and then now. I have to say, you know, there is experience on my side, but when it comes to the analytics, I have to defer to an expert. And our expert today for this rate study is Habib Isaac with IB Consulting. We went through a process, RFP process, to determine which consultant we wanted to utilize for our rate study, and this is for both water and sewer. We received a number of proposals. We did interviews, and IB Consulting came out heads and tails above everybody else. And we're real excited about working with Habib and Andrea. Andrea is his partner. She's down in Southern California. Habib is going to go ahead and give you an introduction of what the rate setting process is all about, some of the challenges we're facing, especially with the ever evolving Prop 218 and the court cases that are going on. And it's kind of like a workshop 101. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Habib.
I just had one question.
Yes.
You said they won hands down. What made them so unique?
I think part of it is not only their knowledge, but how he was able to relate to our individual district, what our needs are. It's not a huge shop where they're dealing with hundreds of clients. He was able to dive into our numbers or proposal that we've sent out and give us some ideas and look at what our challenges are as to what is going to be things that we have to face as we're moving through this process. And somebody who was able to jump in and do that and understand right away what our challenges are, I think he took that extra step to learn more about us. And our former engineer, one of the former engineers, John Griffin, who's gone, he worked with them on twice in the city of Galt with a rate study, and John had glowing accolades for his group.
Did you send out copies of the RFP? I thought I had asked for that, but I may not have. And if you, can I get a copy?
Absolutely.
Yes.
And just one other real quick introduction before we turn it over to Hubby, but we have Rebecca Smith online. Matt is out of the country today, or as they say on the Giants broadcast, he's on assignment. And Rebecca's here, and she has some Prop 218 experience, not specific to CCWD, but if there's questions about the process, she might be able to help.
Yeah, good morning and or good afternoon. Good to see you all. I'm a familiar face to a few of you. Matt and I have worked together on CCWD for quite some time, and I'm happy to be here for all the Prop 218 you possibly need. So,
Nice.
Thank you.
If there are no other questions, I'd like to turn it over to Habib. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. And we're looking forward to being here today. We actually came a little bit earlier and met with staff for about an hour, talked about, the process and things that are going on at the district. So it was very good, engaging meeting. So one thing that we're going to do is evaluate your guys' existing rates and then look at what are some of the options available to you. Even though the numbers may come out correct, that doesn't mean we're not going to look at, multiple options. We want to give you, 2, 3 viable options that get you to the same end result, but maybe have separate, different pathways.
Like, for instance, if you say, okay, we need to raise the rates, but if you did this, like, then maybe we wouldn't have to raise them or something like that. Those are the kind of options.
Yeah, we'll show you what levers you could use, and then both sides of the coin. How does that impact the utility financially, and versus how does it impact the customers from a bill standpoint? And then you have to, from policy standpoint, that's where you make those decisions. Yes. And is this already ready to go? Thank you so much. So to give you a little bit of background, this is myself and my business partner. I've been in public finance since 2003 and worked on with different firms, but my bread and butter has been utility rates since probably 2009. That's what I've slowly been focused on. My background is applied mathematics. My business partner, Andrea, hers is budgeting and auditing. So the combination of both of us work really well. We've been working together for 10 years. Our last stint with the firm was with Raftellus. That's a very national known firm for utility rates. I was the lead supervisor for all the staff on the West Coast and a shareholder. And we decided just to go on our own in 2019, mainly just so we could focus on districts, let's say yourself, mid-sized districts, and not, like the cities of San Diego, the San Francisco PUC, more just the smaller districts that mid to level, medium size. So with that, one thing that's unique with us too is not only are we proposed to do this work, we're the ones that actually are going to be doing the nuts and bolts and doing the analysis. So we don't then give it to lower staff. We're the ones that are going to be working on it. We're going to know the details. And when I come forward and do these presentations, I'm going to have all that background of actually doing it and knowing that information. So these are some of the goals for this cost of service study. And I apologize, I have to look over as I look to what the slide's looking at. So we're going to first look at a long-term financial plan, and we're going to do that for your water and your wastewater utilities. And that's going to be where we're not just going to look at the 5 years that you're able to set for the rate setting period. We're going to look beyond that. Our modeling is going to look long-term, even out 30 years. So then this is going to be a tool that your staff has that could use it for periodic updates or maybe even part of your annual budgetary process to see, it's one thing to set rates for 5 years, but then you could also use it as a means to say, based on what we were projecting, how are we performing? And are we able to do a rate less than what we noticed? And it's almost like your report card. We do that as well for other agencies because we do have to be conservative on our analysis to make sure that we set rates where you're not going to then next year overblow that and then have to go through this process again. That'd be the worst thing that could happen. Also, we have to perform a cost of service analysis, and that's to comply with Prop 218. The one thing we're going to make sure we do is that each parcel and customer gets charged their proportionate share. This is very important to keep to comply with the statutes of the state. And this essentially is where is basically our bread and butter of why you would hire a consultant like myself to do this. We take that liability and we have to show the nexus to say, why is the rate, X dollars in this tier and Y dollars in this tier? What's the basis for that? And we come up with that rationale. The other thing we'll look at is also when that trigger occurs in terms of the level of usage. We also want to make sure that there's a rationale basis for that. And we'll go through that process of what are the rate alternatives that we're proposing. In addition to that, besides making sure that the numbers are correct, we also want to make sure that it's equitable to your customers. What is the bill impact to them if we're making any type of changes? Who is it? Is it something that the board is comfortable with doing, or is there other strategic objectives that the rate should complement? Because it shouldn't just be in a silo. It should also correlate to what your overall goals are, long term, whether it be conservation, affordability, making sure you're using water very efficiently, as opposed to just go ahead, use as much water as you want. So those type of things are going to get embedded into the analysis with how we come up with our numbers. And then lastly, we're going to guide the district through this. This is step one. We're giving you a rates 101 of kind of like what's involved, what are the statutes, and also where are we going before we go there? So you kind of get a sense of our path and what's going to be the next thing we're going to present to you. So we're going to take this into discrete components and then provide, presentation and feedback and interaction with the board, and then use that for coming up with rates. And then lastly is going to be the administrative record. That's the key component that is our main deliverable, besides giving you the actual models for your staff, is to have an administrative record that substantiate your rates, that if someone wants to challenge it, then that's going to be the document that they go off of. And that's where, when we're doing our reports and writing, I write all the reports of IB Consulting. So I'm the one that's writing it. The reason why is because I do pretty well with, taking technical terms and turning into easy to digest. And then it also shows that it's very unique or very specific to your agency. But that's what we're going to stand behind. And we think of it when we write those reports that it's going to get challenged, that it's going to be something that has to be reviewed by a judge. So we take it, we don't take it lighthearted. We take it very serious. And please, if you have any questions as I go through this.
I did have a question.
Yes.
Because you made some comment about, how you're going to keep us informed.
Yes.
And it sounded kind of fluid. It didn't sound like, 6 months from now or a year from now, or
Sure.
to give us more of a firm,
That's a
or you have that down.
That's a perfect segue to this next slide. So I'm glad we talked beforehand for you to do that and cue me up here. But here's the tentative timeline. And what we have, we're doing the data collection with staff right now. Today is the rates 101. And then we're going to come up with the financial plans of both the utilities. And that's pretty much when we will look at coming back to you. I'm not going to identify a specific date right now, but we're going to come back and present you the financial plans of the utilities without looking at rates. It's just going to be, what is the current health of the utility at your current rates, your rate revenue, and then based on best management practices, reserve policies, where you should be. And then we'll show you what does that mean in terms of how much more revenue do you need to bring into the utility to meet your operations, your capital spending, debt compliance, and making sure that you have healthy reserves. So then moving forward, you're in a strong financial position. Yes.
Hey, you said there that you're going to be looking at how much more rates we need to bring it together. Do you also look at how many expenses we have that could be reduced? Is that part of the process as you're going through this?
So we look at both revenues and expenses, but the one thing we don't do is say, well, you could just push this capital project back. That's more the engineering and internally, but we take that information. We don't say, you don't have to do this, you don't have to do that. That's more of an engineering analysis or asset management plan. That's not that part we don't do. But we do incorporate, we do identify which costs are variable versus fixed. So then if there's reduced usage or things of that sort, then those costs come down to connect to make sure it all connects as part of the financial plan.
Can you give me an example of what you might use as a variable cost?
Sure, energy costs.
Okay.
Would be one. Another one could be conservation programs. If you have conservation programs, or rebates, things of that sort. That's another example where if you do see that usage reduced, then that means your conservation programs don't have to be to the same extent because they're working. So then that could be another example.
One of my concerns is what expenses will be used to determine the rate that could potentially, you could say, let's take office supplies or something
Sure.
like that. Do you ever look at what's in that to maybe say, well, this is a one-time purchase. In theory, it should probably be in another spot, but maybe not. So do you look at any of that? And then do you go with the current fiscal year budget and go back? To make sure the expenses are in line, like they don't seem, out of the ordinary?
Yeah, so one thing we do that I would say is a little bit more detailed than even when I was with another firm is we do look at historical data of a couple years because we do want to have a couple years of audited financials. And then we look at what was the increases over that time. And then we look at the budget numbers. And then when we look at your budget versus 2 or 3 years of actuals, we would highlight and identify budget numbers for certain expenses that has changed quite a bit. Okay. And then we'll identify that. Why was this? Why was that? And they would say, oh, it's because so we brought on another FTE or whatever the case may be. So we do go through why those certain expenses increase. We also do that with revenues. And then next, we'll find out, oh, well, that was a one-time expense. And then we'll go, okay, well, then what should we assume projecting forward to then use for, say, 24 on instead of using 23 budget that has a one-time expense in there?
Right.
We do that.
Okay.
Absolutely. And then typically we would always put notes in of, so then when we go back 6 months from now and pull up the model, we have all these notes of these one-time expenses or this revenue was a one-time case.
Because at the same time, you're going to be looking at income. Because,
Yes.
Yes.
We will.
Because, just looking at our charts in our monthly charts, and I'm sure you have that.
And it's going to seem like we talked before this whole thing, but yeah, I do have a thing. I do have a slide on that as well. So I will talk about that because we don't take your budget number as the holy grail. We are going to look recalculating the revenue ourselves and compare it to actuals. So I'll go down into a little bit more detail a little bit later. But first thing we're going to do when we come back is after this is going to be your financial plans. How are you today at current rates? Maybe you don't have to raise rates. Maybe you're fine and it looks like you're good for 3-4 more years. Or maybe you do through small adjustments because 5-6 years from now, you notice that that's when you really need some revenue. And why wait 5 years and have a high increase versus just very modest each year? So then you don't go over the cliff later on. And then from there, after we do the financial plan, we'll then come back after we then do our cost of service analysis. Once you know how much revenue we need, we then allocate that cost to your customers and it's split it between fixed costs and variable costs and tiers. And then we'll come back and tell you, remember those financial plans and the revenue we needed? Now here are the rates. And then we could be more focused on the rates and how is this, and then compare it to existing and is it palatable? And then if it's not, then we're going to talk about those levers on the financial plan that you could pull. But then you will also know in the back of your mind, because we did just the financial plan workshop, what does that do to your utilities health, financial health? So then you're going to have this, teeter-totter of where do you want to be? Where do you want to land? And then that's going to give you good understanding overall. Yes.
The, our current, economic, situation today, whether it's inflation or recession, whatever, is that somehow, considered in these rate studies going forward?
Yeah, so one thing we do as well, we include multiple inflationary factors, whether it be so some of the standard was CPI, right? There's engineer's news record. Then we also have salaries, benefits. We could have CalPERS if you're a part of that. We could go through energy. We could identify many inflationary adjustments because not all costs increase at the same rate, because we are going to do projections of how those costs will increase over time. And then we go through every single expense line item with district staff to determine what's the appropriate inflationary adjustment to use for projections. And then that then is customized to what you need. And if you need to have additional ones that are just very specific to this district. Also, we track CPI and the engineer's news record every single year. So we have that data from 1909 all the way to 2021. And what we've been doing recently, because of the current inflationary climate we're in, for CPI and engineer's news record for 2024, for sure, sometimes 25, but 24, we've been overriding what's the 3-year average or 10-year average has been with what's happening right now today. So we would, right now, a couple of our projects, we're using a 7% inflationary adjustments. And then outside of that year, we then go back to what's the average have been, because we should be probably more in get more back to the average by 2025, I would imagine.
Do you present to the board, however often, but I'd like to see some presentations during the process saying, here's how we arrived at this process, instead of just getting a final review. Is that possible?
And that's essentially what we're doing when we break up this project into these discrete components of the financial plan, which that alone is going to be, this is how you're looking right now, and this is where we recommend you should be and why. And then also, we also going to review your reserve policies as well and look at it in comparison to best management practices. And should there be some adjustments? And those adjustments we can also do on the fly. So there could be even situations when we get to some of these presentations where we could, if you ask a question, can we do this? Can we do that? Can we maybe have more fixed cost revenue or have less? We can make those changes and show you what that result would be.
I have a question.
Yes.
Would you come to like the finance committee and
Yes.
involve us in the process?
I would like when you said that, you work with staff and looking at different items, quite frankly, I'd like to be a fly on the wall, just listening to that, to see, like when we get our budget, we do have some detail, but it'd be nice to know some of that, just so we're doing our due diligence by seeing what we're spending money on and whatnot. So
But
I could
yeah,
bring
at
something
a
to the
committee
finance
level,
committee.
I would see that at a committee level.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna
Yeah.
say, instead of ad hoc, if you could have some kind of a presentation, at each of our finance meetings, once you start getting going. I mean, just a 10-minute, here's where we're at, here's what we've discovered. And if there's something that, we're checking on this one.
Yeah, there's many times where some of our clients have a finance committee of the board of 2 board members where we actually have a workshop with just the 2 of you that gets more into the weeds. And then when we get to the full board, you know the details in the background, and then you provide your guys' feedback to the full board, because that's the part of having a subcommittee.
I would love that.
Yeah.
And we do have a finance committee. We meet
Mhm.
monthly. That would be great to have more in the weeds.
And I believe that was actually in the RFP as well, if I
Okay.
recall.
Thank you.
Yes. And another point is, this is good too, that this engagement, this interaction, this is what we hope for, is not just, sitting in the dais and then not asking any questions. because this makes it more, becomes a better product, if you will.
And that's what
That's
we're
not an
hoping
issue
for.
here, Habibi. We don't have that problem,
Yeah, no.
which is a good thing. I agree.
Yes, yeah. So here are the main milestones. Rates 101, that's today, but long-term financial plans, the cost of service analysis will show you our nexus and why we allocated costs the way we did. Then rate alternatives, just so we're not just saying, here, with the math's correct, here you go, we're done. We're going to show you some alternatives, but still meets the same long-term financial plan goals. Okay. And then the administrative record, the report, we draft the report. We don't really present the report. That's something that is it needs to be available with the district if notices are sent out. And then at the public hearing, that's when you're allowed to officially adopt it if there's not a majority protest. Yes.
Do you ever look at the ratepayers? Do you ever study that to see if you have an area or that they just absolutely, they're on a fixed income? Let's say you have, is there somehow you can look at that to say, well, man, they're not going to be able to afford that? Is that any way looked at? Because I mean, it's like, is it possible? I don't know.
So that's where, like I noticed you have your low income assistance program.
Mhm.
And because of Prop 218, and because it has to be the cost of providing service and in proportion to your fair share of what your burden is, you cannot provide a discount to a subset of customers through rates. So right now, your low income is through non-rate revenue, which is your cell tower revenue.
Mhm.
So then you're allowed to use that to offset rates. But
I
in our,
understand that.
yeah,
I'm just wondering, is there ever a situation, let's say that you're doing a rate study for a community of 800 or
Mhm.
whatever? And what if they are all in like the disadvantaged community and they all only make $800 a month? Is that anyhow factored in? I mean, do you ever come to a point with, oh man, this community is not going to be able to afford these rates. What can we do? And so do you go back to say, is there any expenses, if you will, that could somehow be adjusted? Is there any look at that?
not to that extent, no. And that's mainly because of the statutes, because our hands are tied when it comes to that of trying to find a way to, like one example would be, well, these people shouldn't pay for this expense. But we have to ask the question why. And usually most of the operating costs should be shared by everybody. So unfortunately, that does come up a lot. But this would be when you're looking at trying to have things affordable. This is one reason to, like, let me take one step back. If I was hearing affordability is a big issue, affordability, then in my mind that means, okay, if you don't have tiered rates, we should go to tier rates because that gives you the lowest rate possible for using water efficiently, and then put more of the cost on the higher tiers. I know you already have tiers, but that would be if there's an agency I go to, they're uniform and affordability is a big thing, then that's what we'll do. Or if revenue is sufficient or having stable revenue is something that I hear a lot of, then that would make me think, okay, we need to look at more fixed cost recovery or more cost recovery on the fixed side on the monthly meter charges. But you're doing really well on that as well today, where a lot of your revenue is recovered on the fixed meter charges.
Yeah,
So-
because our hands are tied because we cannot, burden one group
Right.
with
Right.
what we need to charge for everybody. Yeah.
Correct. You can't pick and choose winners and
Well,
losers.
I totally understand that. I'm just wondering, at what point do we as a district get to say, man, these people are at their limit. So what can we as a district to spend less? And yes, it would go everywhere, but.
But
it-
we're
I-
not,
I-
yeah.
I just want to make sure that when on our expenses, is there something that we don't have to do? I don't know, maybe laptops. You know what I'm saying? Is there some way that we can make sure we're taking a look at that as well? And not in
Yeah.
your circumstance. And I know staff does do that, but it's
Right.
important for me just to make sure, that, rates are expensive. And with the way things are going these days, we just got to make sure we're doing our very best
Right.
to
Yeah, if
spend the money.
I apologize for interjecting, but if I might, this is a conversation that's happening in a lot of boardrooms right now. With inflation being what it is, and boards are revisiting rates, you've got rising expenses and concerns about the affordability of rates. And I'd offer, I think you've done a really nice job of teeing up kind of the limitations of Prop 218. For a lot of districts, this is a much more global conversation, and it's happening for my districts of varying sizes throughout the state. Is sort of, it's part of your larger financial planning picture of, okay, if we indicated we can't use rates to subsidize a certain group, or we have limited ability under the California Constitution to change what we do there. But as I think you kind of indicated, you may be having larger conversations in your finance committee about, okay, knowing that we have a limit on rates, we're constantly fighting and looking for new tools to keep things as affordable as possible. It doesn't. I raise this just because this may be that's going to be a conversation that's going to be seated very firmly in your finance committee, and probably well beyond what you do here. But I want you to know you've got other people who are also struggling with these questions and working through them, and it will be a larger kind of a strategic planning sort of question that I think you're going to be continuing to work through over the coming years. So,
Thank you.
And with that, here are some of the general or the main components of Prop 218. So the agency cannot collect revenue beyond what is necessary. So that's fairly straightforward. And one thing on that is important is reserves is considered an expense. So it's not like you're supposed to recover just your operating costs and then your capital. Having a strong financial position requires you to recover revenue for building up your reserves. And then the next one, revenues derived by the charge should not be used for any other purpose other than for which the charge is imposed. So when you're a special district, this is usually, you're usually okay with this. And one example with here is, you can't recover costs on the water side. That's going to be used for the sewer side. This is one is we scrutinize more for cities where they have a cost allocation plan, and then that's where recovering, the utility should pay a share of the overhead costs of finance and the city manager, things of that sort. But then we also have to make sure fire's not in there, the firefighters or police. Those are things that shouldn't be included. So we're very specific on that to make sure that's the case, because we have seen that before. And then the amount of the fee may not exceed the proportional cost of service for the parcel. This is the biggest one why you would hire someone like me, because this is where individuals are going to challenge. They would say, the rates are not fair. You're not charging me my proportional share. I'm being overcharged. And then they don't have to prove it. The district has to prove that, no, we follow the statutes and you are paying your proportionate share. And then no charge may be imposed unless that service is actually used. This one's kind of interesting because, with some of the court cases came out, one would be, well, I don't use recycled water. Why am I being charged for it? But like San Juan Capistrano, that was a component of that rate case besides the tiers. But then, one of the rulings was, water is water. The fact that you may be paying for recycled water improvements on the potable water side, that is still, even though you don't use that water, that's still providing a benefit, and you can fund it through water rates because it's freeing up potable water by keeping those customers off. So that's an example of something of that sort. And then the last one, just procedurally, which is you need to have a 45-day notice. So that 45 days, I would view it as 2 months, because you also have to draft the notice. You have to get it through the print house. There's also been issues lately where print houses have needed longer lead-in times because of just stock paper. Paper stock is limited and that coming in. So it's very important to know what's going to be the lead-in time right now in this climate with just the supply chain issues that are going on. And then I would turn to Rebecca if there's anything else you would like to add, or if I pretty much captured that pretty well.
No, you captured it well. Well done. I'll steal your slides for my own presentations later.
All right, so here's the approach. Let me just go to this one because I like to look at this one. Here's another way to view our approach. So we're going to look at your existing rates, and we already have. We even did so for the interview process. We're going to talk about rate objectives. I'll go through that a little bit with you today. Then we're going to go through some rate alternatives to meet those rate objectives. So those rate objectives are going to drive to some extent what is some of the rate alternatives we could come up with. And then lastly, then we do the full cost of service analysis to show basically our work of how do we get to where we were. But when we look at existing rates, these are things that, some of the things we think about. So how are your rates understandable? Do you guys get feedback of, I don't understand this rate structure? Are your rate revenues predictable? I would say in that case, the answer is yes, because of how much revenue you recover from your meter charges. Any new expenses? Are there things outside, coming on the horizon? Like, do you have more treatment costs? Do you have issues with TDS or contaminants or chromium-6? That's going to cause you, or PFAS. That's a big one right now that there's more treatment costs having to be incorporated. And then, is your administrative record comprehensive? Is it justifying every component of your rates? So these are things we talk about was, also primarily with on the staff level as well. And then rate objectives. With this is where we were kind of talked about it. What's important? Is it affordability? Is it using water efficiently? Revenue stability or equity between customers? So those are the things that we'll be looking at in a little bit here. Yes.
Can we just go back to existing rates?
Yes.
Because you're talking about projection. How much work do you do at the state level to find out what the feeling is at the state level as far as the water is concerned?
Well, at the state level, we keep tabs on what's going on with their like the state water resource control board, and like the budgets that are going to come out with probably within the next year, where they're going to do allocations to every district of this is how much you need to stay within.
That's going to be
so we pay attention to that, and also there is some legislation for providing affordability and credits to low income. But then the issue there is, okay, we have to fund it, but we can't use rate revenue. What are we going to do? There could be some seed money from the state, but it's so minuscule. It's almost, now you're putting us on the hook, us as a district, to then continue that without more money coming from the state. So we do keep our pulse on those type of items because that will impact our work.
Okay.
And then with rate alternatives, this is important. We're going to justify the tiers, the rates that are in those tiers, and also the breakpoints. Yes, please.
Going back to rate objectives, the very last bullet point, and what is administrative ease?
Yeah, sure. So we want to make sure that we're not coming up with this very detailed analysis with all these different variables that you need to make sure your billing system could even, be able to support. And we have this great analysis and everything, all these bells and whistles, but then you can't implement it. So then we want to make sure that your billing system could do it. Yeah. And then,
Our billing system?
excuse me?
Have you looked at our billing system?
No, I'll leave that. But what I do know is you do have tiered rates. So at least we know that you could implement that. There's more complicated rate structures like budget-based rates, but that's not something I would recommend for this district and your demographics. It's not really the right time to do so. And then when we do talk about rate alternatives, here's some ones that we could think about though, is, should we establish pumping zones? You do have quite a bit of different elevations of topography. Does that make sense? And is it going to be palatable to your customers? So that's something we're going to evaluate to look at. And also, how many pump zones would we need? We don't want to go to a point where there's 15 pump zones. That wouldn't make sense. That's now just creating subclasses of customers, pitting against each other. So we want to make sure that we're also looking at it, for the common good, the greater good of everybody too.
So it's looking at how far do you have to pump it? How much it's costing you to pump it further? So the people further away that need to might pay more because it's costing us more to pump it there.
Maybe not further away, maybe more like elevation.
Oh,
where if it's only a community that's up here that needs this lift station, if you will, or pump station, then should that be just a surcharge or just to them? that's something we'll look at, but we're not saying that's what we're going to do. It's just, we're going to evaluate that. So these are kind of like the rate alternatives we could think about based on your specific characteristics and the service area.
Okay, because we do go up and then
Yes.
come down.
Right, right.
I'm impressed with your qualifications in mathematics and all this detailed analysis, but do you also have a crystal ball?
No, I do not.
That was in the RFP.
And the reason I put it that way is I found out this morning that what I was anticipating that would be the cost of our relicensing with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC. I thought it was going to be $13 million to get through the legal process of getting a new agreement. Fortunately, we only have to do this every 50 years, but it's starting now. But Michael said it's going to be 40 million. So
It's also though not rate revenue that we will use for that. We would not use rate revenue to fund a hydropower project. And so the project itself will fund the relicensing.
okay, well, how about the mandated requirement that we start buying electric powered trucks in 2027? That's
That's the
five
kind of thing
five
that
years
we
from
would
now.
have to-
So have you seen the price of electric powered dump trucks and backhoes and I mean, I'm being facetious because
Right.
there aren't any available, but we're being told that we've got to start buying them. I mean, there's this, part of this is just really nonsense, beyond nonsense. So I don't envy you your. You should invest in a crystal ball.
Well, that's why we are conservative with so the revenues, we're conservative by making sure we're not overestimating those revenues. And then with expenses, we're being conservative by making sure that we're not undercutting what the cost may be or cutting a cost that maybe it is going to be there. Because if you think about from our standpoint, the biggest thing besides, the equity of rates, and that's more of the challenge by customer, which is very, very, very important. But the other one, say your rates are perfect and they're no challenge. We need to make sure that you are going to recover the revenue you need based on these the expenses you have based on our analysis. And if we don't, then that's even more liable. So we're very conservative with our projections. And then typically the ideal scenario, which usually is the case, is that you either will go up to your notice. Some agencies just go up to the notice rates, and then if there's surplus, it just keeps going to the reserves to then augment future rate increases, or they go on an annual basis to look at how did we do versus the notice rates before the next notice rate needs to be effective, and do we have to go all the way up? So we do that for, probably like 12 agencies right now that we worked with before. They already have set rates for 5 years, but then as part of their budget process, we do it's like a 30-day turnaround. We update the models based on actuals. We look at where they are. And then, you know what? You outperform. You don't have to go up to that max rate for next year. So
Okay.
that's
So
what
it's
did
not
that.
boom, a certain
did that.
amount
We did it 16.
every year.
2016 we did it. We didn't implement the rates that we had approved in
Yeah.
2013.
And it's nice because then that annual update, we view it as your report card. How are you doing? And I guess it's kind of like our report card too, to
Oh,
a certain
yeah.
extent,
If you set the goals or the objective.
Right.
If I could just interject one other thing here.
Yes.
On this page 6, where it says an agency cannot collect revenue beyond what is necessary to provide the service. And that's a frequently stated fact, and it relates to state law and all that stuff. But it would be helpful to me and to other board members when we go out to these rate hearings, if there was more black and white code law, black and white law, the cite the actual sentence within the law that says that, rather than just having that be an opinion or something that people.
Well, this is in the
Yeah.
statute, in the state
We would all
constitution.
like something more black and white. So
Yeah.
that language actually is in the statute. But I might suggest that what would be helpful is giving some examples of the kind of things that are incorporated into that language. Because there's, we talked a little bit about reserves, and there's a couple of other, I think, more tangible examples that could be worked in. Yeah, unfortunately, that is actually dragged and dropped directly from the law itself. So.
Well, I want to, at the risk of repeating myself, I've been to these rate hearings and people want to know, why are you doing this? And it's going to be very important to me to say, well, okay, right here on the bottom of this page, this is the law. We can't charge more, but we can't charge less. So, I mean, isn't that the way it says? And we got an upper limit and a lower limit?
Yeah, and I guess that's where in your reserve policies, even say some agencies just have what the minimum reserves should be, the minimum reserve requirement. We also want to make sure we're modeling not just a minimum requirement, but also a target. So then essentially you just think about all your reserves in aggregate. There's a minimum requirement and then an ideal target. So then if it does fluctuate your revenues and it goes over, you just want to be within this certain bandwidth. And if you're within the bandwidth, then you're not over collecting or you're not under collecting, you're doing just fine. Some agencies just have this minimum line. And if the reserves go over that, then there's some board members think, oh, we need to refund our customers. Or a customer may be thinking, hey, you have more money than what you need. You need to refund us. But capital also goes up and down every year. And so that's why it just makes sense to have more of a bandwidth to say, this is just to keep it fluid and smooth over the years. I know that's not a very specific answer to your question, but I would say the reason why you're doing it to your customers is, look, this is where we need to be financially. And these rates are going to make sure we're there. And then we have all the expenses, the capital program, everything that went into where the revenue requirements that you need every year. And that'll be in the report.
Okay. And if you have to put the entire law in the report, I would.
Well, we're not attorneys though, so that's important. Where yes, but typically, just in general, we would put those main components of Prop 218, and then we'll just state how the agency, the district, is complying with those in quick narrative form.
There's also some resources that are, free and available. I know CSDA has a Prop 218 pamphlet that might be helpful. We can use that or borrow from that to share with customers. We'll definitely put a toolkit together.
Yeah, and we have a number of CSDA has these options available. Aqua has a number available as well. Matt and I do this kind of work a lot, and I'm happy to coordinate with him to give you some good slides and talking points. Prop 218 it's gnarly to wrap your head around, especially if you're a ratepayer who doesn't deal with it every day. And so we can help to distill that down to make it easier for you all to communicate to your ratepayers.
And here's another example on the wastewater side with some rate alternatives. One would be, should wastewater have flow rates for commercial customers as opposed to just that flat charge per EDU? That'd be something we evaluate. I'm not saying that's what we're going to implement, but it's a rate alternative that we could consider that still gets you to the same end result. And maybe it may be more equitable that way. And then when we do that, though, we have to make sure we confirm what the total flow projections from commercial. And the way we do that is by looking at what was the total amount treated at the plant, and then incorporate how much is coming from residential, how much is related to I&I, and then come up with this is the amount that's coming from commercial. So then we want to make sure those tie. So that could be an example of making sure you charge your customers the cost of providing the service, because sometimes if you look at EDUs, it might assume a certain amount of flow. And if you look at aggregating that might be more flow than what's treated at the plant. So then that could be a way of doing it.
What about using the amount of water they use instead of looking at the plant and taking out the I&I? Just use the amount of water that the commercial customer uses as the flow rate.
Well, the rate would then be charged based on water usage, but the way that we allocate the cost to commercial is going to be based on our projected flow and not water use, because the water use could have outdoor usage that has nothing to do with return flows, return sewer flows. So we got to be careful that we don't assume that the water is representative, 100% of it is representative of return flows.
Unless they have a separate meter for outdoor and then.
Yeah, if they have a separate meter, then we would typically, you would see like a 90% return factor. So it still would have 10% that doesn't go back down the drain.
No, we don't have that many commercial accounts, but that is interesting another way to look at that.
Yeah, and that was one of the discussions we had that I had with staff this morning, of talking about that. And then lastly, cost service strategic objectives, capital funding approach. You do have that R&R component. We expect to continue that just from the discussions. It seems like it's been pretty successful for you guys. The fixed cost recovery as a percent, revenue, review the revenue in each tier, and analyze bill impacts. So one thing that I want to state real quick is I did mention earlier that we don't just take your budget as the holy grail when it comes to revenues. So what we do is we actually get all your account data, your billing data of every single account, their meter size, their usage of every single month. And then say we'll do it for 2022, it just ended. We then recalculate what the revenue would be based on what the rates are and the usage by tier to come with revenue. And then we compare it, what we calculate, to your audited financials. And then with water, we want to be within 3% of your actuals. And if we are, then that makes us feel really good that the data that we were using is sound. We're now using that for projections. And then we have all the units of service. So then if we're going to change the rate structure, we already know, we just checked in the very beginning because the revenue came out correct on the existing rates. If we change it and make it move a different way or change the tiers, we have the right units of service flowing through the model to make us feel comfortable that the new rates are also correct. That's very, very important. It's almost like a quality check before we even get to the very end. And then sometimes we find out we're off by 10, 15%. And then we go into it, investigate, and, oh, you know what, there was an issue with the export. Not all the accounts came out. Like little things like that come up, or, oh, we misinterpreted the rate. This is bi-monthly, not monthly. Like those type of things just show itself by going through that process. All right, so here are your existing rates. You have water rates by monthly, by meter size. That's a very common approach. And then you have your variable rates. You have drought rates as well. You're in stage 2 right now, but I understand it's really more in terms of the messaging focus, but you're not actually imposing the tier 2, stage 2 surcharge. That's very common as well, so that's fine. We will be updating all these rates, and then the variable tier allotments, we're going to make sure that we also have a sound basis for those tier breakpoints. And then for sewer, here's your residential, non-residential. It's a per single family dwelling equivalent, but I basically just call it EDU. It's per EDU. So we'll look at that as well. We'll look at, how the EDs are assigned to commercial. Then do we want to switch to flow rates? And then in all these though, whenever we change rates or even update the existing rates, we always look at customer impacts. So we got to see that side of the coin and say, who's going to get impacted and to what extent? All right, so quick review on your water rates. The fixed charge by meter size, very common, as I mentioned. We're going to continue that R&R component. Maybe that's going to get recalibrated. Tier variable rates. And just in general, we brought this up, the more tiers that you introduce, the more additional detail you need to support those rates. So if you have 10 tiers, you better have very detailed costs and like 6 different water supplies. But one of the best ways to substantiate tier rates is by different water supplies or different, pumping costs related to the different basins, things of that sort. You can also use the usage characteristics of your customers, of how they use water over the year, of during the winter versus during the summer, and then do an analysis of the tiers are based on that usage characteristics over the year.
Can we lump our raw water rates in with the metered rate structure? And the reason I ask is because we have only a few ag customers, but we can't ever raise the rate because there's so few, it's pretty easy for them to protest.
Well, you don't need to, just because you have a different rate for the, like the non-potable, that doesn't mean now they have their own separate public hearing. They're a rate, then they have a
Well, no,
different
but
rate.
what I'm saying is, in the past, we haven't put those together. But if we develop both the metered rates and the ag rate and come up with a, a calculation that makes sense, because it's extremely low. It's like 18 bucks an acre foot. Or something.
We will look at what costs are avoidable that allows that raw water rate to be lower. I just want to make sure that when we're talking about the public hearing or protest, they're just 3 customers, whatever the number is, of the entire aggregate. They're not their own separate silo.
Well, but they are if you don't do it at the same time, is what I'm trying to say. We have to, I think we need to take a look at whether or not we can do that as part of this whole package.
And are they contract customers right
They are
now?
contract customers.
Okay, so if they're contract customers, then they're outside of Prop 218 compliance and requirements. So you could, if you have a contract with them, then those are just like other operating revenues that then just offsets expenses to all the rest of your potable customers.
So, and that's a conversation we can have too, because that same kind of, that would apply to wholesale water customers too.
Yeah.
So when we have individually negotiated contracts with the water user, it doesn't necessarily have to go through the same process.
Oh. And the slurry line, is that contract also?
The what?
Slurry line,
Yes,
that's contract as well?
yes.
Are we gonna have that discussion, an opportunity to discuss that as to whether or not they're contract or not going forward?
We can absolutely have that discussion. We've already approved the contract for the slurry line. We have the template for the slurry line customers, and we have the one approved contract.
And ag customers as well?
Those are separately approved for the Calaveras River. Each of those contracts was separately approved by the board.
Right, is there an opportunity at this point to bring them into a 218 process, all of our rates?
We can talk about it.
Right,
Absolutely.
okay.
Well, let's have that
Go
discussion.
through
Yeah,
engineering or
yeah, we can have that discussion.
If you did bring them into the overall analysis, that would include you from changing the contracts at intervals less than 5
Right.
years.
I'm not sure why we would want to subject ourselves to Prop 218 where we don't have to.
Okay.
Yeah, I
We
would
can have
agree.
that discussion.
Let's, I want to have that discussion and see where the recommendations lie and why.
I think we're finished that discussion already.
Then with not. Oh,
all right,
sorry.
let's let him continue.
And then with non-residential irrigation, uniform rates is very common because if you, within that customer class, that's typically usually the most equitable because with non-residential, there's so many different commercial uses. You have a brewery, you may have a coffee shop, they use the water so differently that putting them into a tiered rate is going to maybe fit one of them, but not the other. And one would get penalized and one would never go into a higher tier. Another example would be, well, not example, but, even though they don't have tiered rates, that doesn't mean that they're not paying their proportionate share of the total cost. And the way we ensure that is because when we allocate all the costs to customers, we first allocate it to the customer classes. So say, for example, we say through our analysis, residential needs to recover $2 million. Well, whether we do a uniform rate or we do tiers, residential is still going to do $2 million. And in commercial, if it's $1 million, they're still going to do $1 million, whether it's uniform or tiered. By changing the rate design, that doesn't change how much is allocated to them at a customer class level. All it does is tells us this is the way we should do it for vertical equity, if you will. What makes the most sense for the accounts within that customer class? How should we structure the rates to make it equitable for those specific accounts? But it doesn't mean that because they're uniform, they're getting a break or they're getting a discount, okay? And then here's for wastewater. flat charges for residential is very, very common because, even though maybe in the summer you might do a little bit more laundry or have a couple, an extra shower here and there, residential flows are fairly consistent throughout the year. And then for non-residential, it's EDU based right now. We could look at the assignment of those EDUs, just get an understanding of how they were assigned, but we're not going to change the EDU assignments. That's more for like engineering, and that all those EDUs probably have happened over the course of years and decades of when those commercial properties came online, that it'd probably be hard to look back and say, why was this assigned, what it was. But it was back then, it was reviewed, and they were assigned a certain amount by staff and engineering based on the plans. But we will look at, the flow rates, as I mentioned, to see if that's more equitable and does it make sense. And again, what's the impact to those customers based on how they're being charged today. I can go real quick. Coster, here's the rate objectives. And what we have here is just a list of these rate objectives with what does it mean from a definition standpoint. Like what does that mean from the way we interpret it? So like I said, administrative ease, we already explained that a little bit earlier. Affordability, maintain the price of water for essential use at the lowest cost possible. One thing I want to point out is, conservation, which is the third one, and then efficiency, which is the sixth one. You would think, wait, those are the same, but they're really not. Conservation is more, let's reduce water volume usage as a whole. Whereas efficiency is, no, let's just try to focus on reducing wasteful use. So there's a little bit of difference there. That's where like maybe you do have tiers to say, message, where are we showing as being excessive? And then that's how we're trying to promote efficiency as opposed to, we want everyone to cut 20% water usage. But what about Starbucks? They use a ton of water just for their process. Does that mean they have to reduce their water usage? So those are like the little nuances there. But overall, what's important here, if we go to this next slide, is these are competing objectives. So we think about affordability. So that means keep the rates low, but we also want to make sure that, well, let me take one step back. When I think affordability, I don't think give discounts because that's where you're not allowed to do it. I think affordability is give customers more control over their bill. So affordability means control, customer control, which then would mean let's have a lot of the revenue recovered on the variable side. So then if they don't use that much water, they're going to have a lot of savings. But then that counteracts revenue stability. Now the district has volatile risk, of how much revenues can come in, and now it's not predictable. So there's these competing objectives of us having to understand what's more important to the district.
How far back do you go and look at our rates?
Usage wise?
Just the rate. I think we did that. I think we changed this in our last rate 5 years ago, where we hadn't been that where we noticed it big time going into the drought.
Yeah.
That people were using less water and we were suffering.
Right.
I mean, and that's the way I think we went to more
Of a fixed recovery.
of a higher base rate
Mhm.
and to gain stability.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, so that's what I was asking. How far back do you go back 10 years and look at what our rates have been?
Well, I already have the 2013 report and then the 18 report. So
yeah,
we
okay,
do
so-
have that. Yes.
Yes.
And then we also do look at, the usage, like usually it's in your CAFR of historical water sales or production from like 2013 on, because 13 was the baseline when then we had monetary conservation in 2015, so on and so forth. So we look at what that trend was. And then another phenomenon is COVID. COVID impacted water usage and have upticks in residential use and people probably moving out here.
Right.
Right. So is that a fair, baseline to use, or should we use something
Will
else?
that continue then?
Right, right. So there you go, that crystal ball, right? And then defensibility and customer understanding, that goes back to that other comment, like we can have very detailed analysis, all these bells and whistles and variables, but then can the customer look at it and determine what their impact is going to be? And if they can't, then maybe it's a little too complicated. We want to make sure that's digestible. And then here's just history of rate design. It started like flat rates. which is kind of like what your sewer are now for water. Then it went to uniform rates, where if you think about uniform rates, just think of it like gasoline, right? Just very straightforward. Then uniform rates by customer class, where then we account for the usage characteristics and the usage patterns of your different customers, where, you know, certain customers peak on the system differently, like ag customers versus commercial, residential, and that then drives having different uniform rates to your customer classes. Then we got to tiers, and then that's where you are right now. And then tiers makes sense for residential, but we still recommend uniform.
With our new meters, we know what time people are using water, but could we do what PG&E does and raise our rates at 4 o'clock when everyone gets home? And
Yeah, sure. Let me know if your billing system can accommodate that.
Halftime at the Super Bowl.
And then there's budget-based rates. I do a lot of budget-based rates analysis. That's where it gets very sophisticated, and it gets where it's, you know, some of you maybe even here be like, wait, this is Big Brother coming in and looking at my lot size and how many people I have in the property. That I wouldn't think that's probably makes the most sense for your service area. So hopefully I captured that correctly in terms of what the perception would be here. And then with wastewater, again, flat rates. We do have flow-based rates that we can consider. And then there's also strength-based rates, where not only do you look at the flow commercial, but also look at what type of strength concentration is that flow coming from that business, like a brewery versus just an office building. Office building is like no different than a house. You know, it's like bathroom, that's it. So then you could then weight it based on the strength to say, well, you guys have to pay more. That was something Jeff mentioned, that we worked with John Griffin in City of Galt, where we actually did this for them, where we did it based on strength, but we did it more high level, where we did low, medium, high. So then the agency and staff have the ability to review new projects come on and say, you know what, after review, you're going to be classified as high use. So then it doesn't have to be, you know, some agencies have a schedule of 12 uses, and it's like, oh, you're not in these 12. So I know you're not a laundromat, but we're going to put you as a laundromat for the rate. So that gives you some flexibility there. But I think on this case, we're going to look at flow rates, because you're not doing any type of flow rates. That maybe if it is something considered right now, it would just be a uniform flow rate and not incorporate the different strains. Maybe that'd be like another step, like maybe the next rate case, if you even decide to go with flow rates. So I don't know if we want to impact everybody with flow and weighting it based on strength. That might be a little too aggressive.
Right, and confusing.
And then lastly, this is, even though I've been receiving a lot of interaction from you, and I greatly appreciate it. You know, these are some of the street objectives to think about. You know, a significant portion of utilities costs are fixed. You are recovering a high percentage on your fixed cost recovery because you have that R&R component, which is great. That gives you really sound revenue stability. And if we do go back to management conservation, you're going to probably be okay. And this is also probably a reason why you're in stage 2, but don't have to incorporate that surcharge, because you have very stable revenue. If you're back when you're, I don't know what your percentage was before, I would probably expect that you would be charging that 24-cent surcharge right now, right?
And we really didn't want that at all.
Right.
No.
You know, it's so funny
Yeah.
that you mentioned that we have so many projects where they want us to come up with drop rates, and then we come up with them, but then they never get implemented, which is like, you know, but it's still necessary just so you have it as one of your tools to use just in case, right? But it looks really bad on a notice to show, here's your base rates, and then if this happens, it's here, and then if this happens, it's just going up. It's a lot of, I would say, customer, rate
Yeah.
fatigue.
Yeah, we don't want to redesign our bills.
Yes. So, and then, so what we're going to do, because of where you are, our baseline, when we come with the cost of service analysis, we're going to try to allocate expenses that are, it's sound or has a good rationale, but to get to that 80% threshold. So then we're like, look, we're at your same baseline of today. And if you want to change that, we can change this expense, that expense from fixed to variable to change that percentage. But our baseline is going to be staying at the same where you are today. And then with wastewater, where I already mentioned about non-residential, but if there's any other considerations or hot topics or things that have been brought up, please let me know and I'll just jot those down of things that we should be aware of when it comes to reviewing your data, coming up with analysis that we hit some of these components. But you also gave me a lot of feedback already, and I really appreciate that you guys, this was more of a discussion as opposed to me just doing a presentation. So thank you so much for that. And if you have any other questions or general comments or things that I've experienced, please let me know. But again, I appreciate your time on doing this rates one-on-one.
I had a question back on the rate study schedule, and we're talking data collection. We're doing that, we did that, and we're going to use October. But what I wanted to talk about was the community workshops. Are you going to be part of that?
Yes, I will be here. And then it was just good.
Worth of hobby.
It was just, I'll make sure I wear my cowboy boots that day. I'll see about today, but I said I'll wait. But no,
It's hot.
yeah, no tech. But I was telling you, having some staff, I'm in Temecula, I'm on 2 acres. I have chickens, I have a rooster, I have a pig, I have a horse, we have 3 dogs. So this is kind of like
you're the right guy for this.
yeah, this is that I appreciate the drive over here. It's nice. But yeah, so there's just one workshop in the initial RFP, but then in discussion with the agreement, Jeff, I believe Mike as well was thinking, we probably have to have multiple workshops to hit the different areas of the service and not make everyone come to one spot. So we have workshops now, but we just want to do it in one trip for me to come up here. So then maybe it's over a course of a couple of days and then it's not, over like different weeks.
Because we have 5 distinct, places here in Calaveras County, and everybody's got special needs or they're doing things differently, and it's, to customize it to the different groups is very, very important.
Understood. Yeah.
One of the hats that I wear because of my responsibilities here is the local Parks and Recreation Commission. And I don't think that we currently have a mechanism where we could give a park development a break on the infrastructure costs and the monthly rate for the water and stuff. But is there a mechanism that could be implemented that would allow that? That you would consider the justification in my mind would be for the community beneficial, the benefit of having a park and spreading that through the tax base or something for the county. But could we give a 50% discount on the infrastructure cost that we would charge single family residents if we wanted to put a bathroom in a park?
Yeah, fortunately, no, not in terms of it coming from rate revenue, because it would have to come from another revenue source, such as the cell tower, which wouldn't be enough, or any other non-rate revenue would have to support that, unfortunately.
Okay.
Very good. Any other questions? Anybody else?
That wasn't the answer that I wanted.
I know.
We could still land.
Okay, do you need
Not
anything
right,
from us, decision wise?
No, not at this time. We just wanted to make sure the board had an opportunity early in the process to meet Habib and get an understanding of the process and provide input and feedback as we go along. So we'll have multiple opportunities for that.
And hopefully you guys have an understanding of, and this is a goal too, where we're going before we come and show you things. Like, I think you have a sense like, look, we're gonna look at, pump charges and flow rates for wastewater. So at least you have a sense of the pathway we're taking before we come back to you.
I just want to make one comment that, and you mentioned this, but you don't get any credit for keeping your rates flat and then raising them 20% all at once.
Right.
That's when they fire the general manager and fire the board. I mean, we got to keep up with inflation, but I'm just hoping that, we don't have any big start rate increases, but we need to be, consistent so we make up all that, because when you're flat like this and then you go up, you miss that whole triangle
Mhm.
of revenue. And we all know we got more things to fix than we have the money for in the first place.
That's a very good point. One thing that is happening with our clients right now is, look, if our revenue needs is less than the current inflation rate right now, we're doing a good job. So we have agencies where it's 5%, adjustments, and they're using that as like, we must have our ship in order if we're asking you for a revenue need that's less than the inflation that has been going on for months now. So that's kind of been like the litmus test, if you will, on the current rate cases.
It's one of the things that we do, thank goodness with our public outreach, our customers are very well informed, through our website and through mailings about where we are and what our story is. So let's continue that groundwork as we go through this.
Yes.
Because that's key, as all of us can say. Yes, we can attest to, sitting on the board for many years. Yeah.
Okay, well,
right.
thank you so much.
Thank
And
you.
I'm sorry, what was her name online?
Rebecca.
Rebecca. Thank you, Rebecca. And thank you, Abib, and we look forward to seeing you soon.
Yes.
All right, thank you, everybody. We're going to take just a short recess and do need anything. All right, we're moving on to item 4B, discussion action regarding lot line agreement and escrow agent instructions, Golden State Equity Investors, Inc., relating to APNs. Do I need to read them?
No.
Okay, for Copper Cove wastewater pond 6 dam raise project, CIP 15112, and we're looking at Charles. Hi, Charles.
So in the agenda packet, we've got the lot line adjustment agreement and escrow agent instructions for the board's approval or comment. And there's also an exhibit map in there that explains where this lot line adjustment is. It's basically right in front of the toe of the dam. And it's properties of, it's 150 feet in width and 1,500 feet in length. And it's just situated right in front of the toe of the dam. And that borders, our Copper Cove wastewater treatment plant property, and then the adjacent parcel owned by Golden State Equity, also known as Tuscany Hills. So right along that property line. And there's also a land appraisal that we use for the basis of the property value. And that's pretty much it.
So
Move to accept it.
two things real quick, sorry. One is that the appraisal you'll notice, and Director Thomas and I talked about this morning, is an appraisal for a 50-acre site. That was done initially for the lot that is proposed to transfer to the CCWD land transfer to CV developers. That is still a possibility, but there's other processes that are playing out. But the discussion that we had agreed upon was the per acre price would be the same, since right next door. So that's how we arrived at the per acre price. Second point is in the recitals, which aren't numbered, unfortunately, but the second recital is where the per acre price is stated. And there's a bit of a hangover there from a previously negotiated, or a part of the previous discussion was whether there could just be a land swap for the land that they need versus the land that we need. We decided against doing that, as there are two separate entities involved that we're negotiating with. And so we just wanted to agree on a per acre price that would apply to both. So the change in that second recital is just where it says 57.32 and 38 cents per acre. That's the end of the sentence. We'll just put a period right there, and there's no future appraised value needed or future credit to have to worry about. It's just a fixed per acre price.
Yeah,
And I talked to the developer about that this morning. They're fine with that too.
I didn't like that reimbursement clause either.
We didn't want the uncertainty there. So I think as long as everybody agrees to that dollar amount as the fixed per acre price, we can just leave it at that.
I'll second it if we haven't got a second yet.
Discussion, go ahead.
Okay, I'm concerned, Charles, about that. There's a photograph. I had it.
Yeah, the land appraisal had a lot of supplemental documents that are not
No,
directly,
no,
it's
no.
related to the appraisal.
I'm not talking about that. It's a photograph that shows that it's a new boundary line photograph that shows the land acquisition. What I'm concerned about is that currently we have a circulation road that goes at the toe of the slope of the existing dam, goes down against the fence line.
Correct.
I just want to make sure that your 150 feet that this thing sticks out there is going to also provide enough room to have a circulation road at the fence line after you've done constructing the dam.
And it will, yeah,
Okay.
it's plenty of room. We also have to relocate, in order to raise the dam, we have to relocate a sewer force main and a raw water line that are right at the existing toe of the existing dam. And then there's some pump stations down there that have to get relocated as well. So,
Okay.
and as far as temporary construction, in directly building the dam, it should be sufficient room as well.
Okay. And there's no wetlands or anything that we have to be concerned about in that 150 feet?
There are some drainages there, and we will have to go through some permitting processes. We're going to have to do that regardless. So as part of the dam raising the dam.
So that'll be another 150,000 or something.
That check for.
Hopefully so.
Okay, I'll second that motion.
All right, well, I think Jeff and Scott beat you on that, but
Oh.
how about public comment? Any public comment here? Any online? No public comment. Okay, we have a first and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? I'm not used to everybody being here. Great. Okay, so you got your lot line adjustment.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Thank you, Charles.
All right, let's move on to old business, 5A, discussion action regarding the draft commercial account review policy. That would be Jess. Hi, Jessica.
Hi, good afternoon. So since our board meeting on September 14th, when we last discussed this draft policy, staff have been able to get together, review your comments and suggestions. And we did make some edits. They were quite minor. I think we had a really good discussion that meeting. But as far as updating our draft policy, we didn't have to do too much. And in addition to comments that you all made, we did just do some cleanup on like some redundancies in text and just some clarifications. So if you all have any more suggestions, now's the time. We can take that back. But the tentative plan right now is, once we receive your input this time, we will work to finalize the document and bring it back to you all for approval.
Much public comment on.
So once we set the date for the board meeting for when you will approve this, that's when we will push out the notice to the public that we may be updating the policy. And that will be that time.
Okay, but have you been?
We haven't had to work with the public since we last met. This was just purely taking your guys' comments and updating it for you all to review.
I just have one question, Jessica. I think I probably know the answer to this, but I'll ask you anyway. The 2-year delay that is talked about continuously in this about asking for a review. Hypothetically, if I wanted to buy an existing building that had, or a business that had been in existence for more than 2 years, and before I close the deal, I want to come in here to CCWD and I say, it looks like to me that there's the charges for the water and sewer are too high on that building. Do I have to wait 2 years after I buy it, or can I take advantage of the 2 years that it's been in existence and then ask for an immediate review?
I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Charles, Damon, that you can do it at that time and you can look back. And also, that's when we assess the new usage and all of that and, what.
Does
that-
it state in here that you can't?
Let's see,
Because the 2 years
I think
seems
it's
kind
I'm
of
trying to
hard.
find it. I'm
I
trying
think
to.
it's 2 years from the establishment of the account. It could also be a change of use if if the new owner is proposing.
Or,
Right.
different.
or
that's-
upon a
yeah.
change of business use of the commercial
Right.
property.
So,
that do it?
That's, well,
That's not-
I saw that where it says that it's upon a change, but if you want to continue the use, I'm a new owner and I think the charges, I can look at the charges for the last 2 years and I think they're too high. I just want to make sure that somebody doesn't get told, oh, well, wait a minute, you have to wait 2 years after you buy it.
No,
Okay.
yes.
Can
Oh,
can
it has to
we
be-
add that, whether it's a new owner in there?
just because the objective there is we don't want a new commercial connection coming in and trying to change it before we have data to support whether
I
that's the
understand.
appropriate size or not. And so it's 2 years from when the account was created initially, regardless of change of ownership.
Can we get some clarity though that says in his?
I
I don't think it's.
I don't think it's
Think it's
necessary.
necessary?
I'll make sure that it is clearly stated in there. I'll double check.
Hey, at the very top of this page, it says a minimum administrative review fee of $330, which varies by connection.
What's the rate?
Yeah.
What does that mean and why?
Right.
So that was, we discussed that quite a bit. So, we had this as a minimum amount and that what that's based off of is about 4 hours of work based on our, inspector's, rate. And that's just because, to do any of these, review processes, we do think it will take a minimum of 4 hours to do. And then the more complex the businesses or the facility is, potentially the more that we would need to charge in order to do a full review of the.
Is there any reason to add in there, based on, our hourly wage or something of that nature so people kind of have an idea what they're,
Yeah, I think it should
Or
have
time
some
and
kind of hourly
materials,
rate.
it could just be a time,
well, I mean,
reference
it's just
time
kind
and
of the same thing we do for.
Or which
Basically
may,
an estimate,
material.
or which
a
may,
time estimate is all it really is.
something like which may increase due to complexity, due to
Complexity.
complexity.
Mhm.
Shouldn't they have
Flexibility.
some kind of an hourly rate though? I mean. You
Well, that's
came
good.
up with an hourly rate for the minimum. Why can't you just say an hourly rate of?
5 years from now, you'd have to change it though, for 2 years from now. The hourly rate's gonna go up, so. It's just,
But when somebody comes in, you'll be able to tell them what the hourly rate is. We just
Yeah.
don't
We
need it
would.
in here.
Yeah, at that point.
Yeah, yeah.
At 82.50.
We might want to clarify that a little bit more, because I think that's the kind of thing where we could end up with questions that are better answered if they're already in policy, so with that.
Yeah, well, which includes 4 hours of review.
Right.
If more is required, the rate will increase.
The rate will be, well, what, you tell them. What is this size, the standard size for a residential? It is, everything's 5/8 and that's
No,
what the,
not everything. They're on the fire sprinklers, we upgraded those.
We allow up to 1 inch at the 5/8 inch rate if the increase is needed just for fire sprinklers.
I was just confirming like the minimum meter size for commercial 5/8. Is that our small one?
Yes.
Is that involved in anyone else, Michael, besides new construction? At this point, if we come across anybody that,
No, I suppose it could happen if there was a remodel that was significant enough to trigger a fire sprinkler requirement and they needed additional flow, that would probably fall within the same category. To mine, no, I'm not sure if that has happened. But yeah,
Could.
yeah, it could.
So ultimately, this policy change could potentially give them a bill where it would be cheaper, right? And that's the goal that we wanted, and it's achieving that with all that we've done. No, when I see some of the things that says, okay, we're gonna validate it through the California Plumbing Code and stuff like that. I just want to make sure that it ultimately just comes out to where people can have the opportunity to lower their bill under a couple of scenarios, and it reaches all that. Anybody else have any comments or questions? All right, do we have any public comment online, Rebecca? Any public comment here? All right, seeing none, do we have a motion?
There's
So moved.
this discussion.
Oh, sorry.
righty then.
So I guess.
Oh, it's not, no. we're
It's
not
no,
moving
yeah,
on.
no action at this time. We just wanted to make sure, that was the discussion we had before, was we bring it back for one more discussion, and we have to publicly notice the approval of an ordinance when we bring this back, so you probably won't see it again until November.
So you don't, there you go.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Jessica.
All right, moving on to reports. Damon, report on September 2022 operations and engineering.
Well, sure missed you on the last
Yeah.
operations report. You had Pat and Jesse in here trying to
Yes.
take the
That was
blame.
fun, though.
They did
They-
great. from what I- Yeah.
It's hard to be bubbly.
Yeah. Am I bubbling? All right.
They-
Thank you, Jeff.
They didn't even know where all the photographs were. There was a photograph in there of these smiley faces on these things.
I brought it back.
Stay tuned.
Oh,
I brought it back, yeah. Brought the photograph back. Good afternoon, Board, President Cicada. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Just a couple highlights to discuss for September's operations report. I want to say hats off to everybody that participated in the Copper Cove Town Hall. Hats off to Charles and Jesse and crew, and Jared did a great job. I was there online. I got to see the action and participate from a distance. And then also I want to just acknowledge our staff that worked on coordinating with Calaveras County on the repave of O'Byrne's Ferry Road. We were able to get some pipe in the ground for a collections project, Copper Cove Lift Station Rehabilitation Project, without negatively impacting the county's paving job. So that was I think it speaks to the improved coordination between CCWD and Calaveras County, which I think is great. And then just really high level, distribution crews made 63 leak repairs in the month of September. 41 of those were in Rancho. 10 in Copperopolis and 12 up on the pass. And the collections crew cleaned a significant amount of lift stations. So there's always all this work going on. And then I show you pictures of some of the high points and some of the more interesting ones. And I want to acknowledge also that the underground crew replaced 620 feet of failing 2-inch main and 8 services last month, which was great up in Rancho Paradiso.
2-inch back here?
For this private area, yes, we did. Yeah. Yeah, we just replaced like for like. But that 2-inch was Bluebell. So it's like every section was cut every like 6 feet. And so this is a large headache off our back there. So we're back to Rancho. Here's a sample site failure. This is an interesting one. So in that piece of PVC, white PVC, generally there would be a hose bib or some sort of tap where we could pull a Bac-T sample or any other water quality sample, and that failed. And this is what folks usually report in. I understand there's always lively conversation about water leaks in all of our service areas, and we just want to illustrate that our crews are always out there and working to repair them. Hence 41 service repairs in the month of September in Rancho. So here we are in Hedgepeth, service line leak and repair.
People drive for thousands of miles to see Old Faithful, and you're shutting it down.
recreated in Calaveras County
Yeah,
almost
just
daily.
hang out in your service area. Eventually it'll pop. But I wanted to highlight this. You guys have seen pictures like this every month. But here we are again with replacing the section of service lateral that has multiple full circle clamps on it in the picture on your left. It's kind of hard to see next to the pipe wrench. The wrench, there's a service line with multiple full circle clamps on it.
There's only 5 or 6.
Yeah.
Right.
Can we reuse those?
No, we can't, unfortunately. We have some leather that we can reline them with. And yeah, and so here we are with a flare replacement on a water main. So great work by our crews. There's the gap vacs in action, a piece of equipment that we purchased in 2020, I believe. Here's some more pictures of that replacement. And then here we are with a AC main brake. So AC main brakes tend to shear brake, so they just snap like a perfectly split, like you chopped a piece of lumber in half. And that full circle clamp on the right is the most effective repair for an AC main brake. You see the pickup tube in the image on the left, which is sucking up all the debris and dirt around the failure so we can put the full circle clamp on. And here's just, some backfill material from back in the day that was on this
water main that ultimately led to its break, which is this giant rock. We encounter that often in all service areas. You know, backfill was not necessarily of an acceptable quality. And here's another 6-inch main break, very similar to the last. Let's see here. Here we are tapping the slurry line. Just wanted to give you guys an idea of how remote portions of the slurry line are. And the picture on the right, you can see Roger standing next to the line, and it's a yellow PVC coated aluminum line. Very interesting. It's not exactly 6 inches. It's not 7 inches in diameter. It's kind of in between. It's a unique size. And so it's just kind of an interesting, as we all know, there's a lot of interesting things about the slurry line, but
How much pressure is in that thing right now?
it depends on where you're at. So if you're at the highway, if we don't we have a pressure reducing valve about halfway down the hill towards Highway 4 from Catamatri, where it's coming off the ditch there. It can be up to about 440 PSI crossing the highway if we don't knock the pressure down. At that location, unmitigated pressure, you're looking at about 60 PSI. But because we have to break pressure so we can reduce it potentially beyond that site, you're at about 50 right here at this location, which is kind of a quarter of a way down the mountain. So it's kind of go down one side and halfway up another, kind of through a draw.
400 that's kind of high.
It's a little high. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's sleeved, it's steel encased, and it's also, at that point, you're in the actual slurry line proper. So you're in that ductile pipe there with the tar wrap on it. Here we are with our mechanics pulling an aerator, just an example of coordination between operations, mechanical. This is out in Copper at the one of the ponds, 1 or 2.
Is that the truck we bought last week or last?
No.
This is exactly like the truck that you bought last week, though. This was the one that was purchased the year prior.
Yeah, your truck is in many of your pictures very nicely.
Yeah, yeah, and just so you know, we used to have to rent a crane to do this work because we used to not have trucks that could hold or could house a crane that large on the actual service body. So it really streamlines the work effort because we don't have to schedule anything. We just go out and do it. We've pulled potable water pumps also. The electricians love these kind of pictures. This is an example of, normally there's 3 fuses in that box there, and you can see that the housing for the one that blew also blew. So that used to be a little housing that held a fuse on the bottom there, and the close-up image on the right showed that it just melted away.
Wow.
Here's everybody's favorite truck. This is the bucket truck in action. Yeah. Yeah, this one's replacing antenna and coax on the 6 Mile lift station's communication tower. So this truck is it's a great tool for our electricians.
I didn't realize that boom was going to extend like that.
Yeah.
We should have paid more money for that.
Man, we could have too. Just give me the chance.
How much did we save in rental from this day?
Oh, yeah. At least $1,000 on that. Yeah. These are great pictures of the White Pines tule removal on the dam and the spillway cleanup. A little hard to see in the image on the left there, but you can kind of see this kind of mat of tules, and then right past that mat of tules is the spillway, and it's just chock full. And so our construction crew is hard at work. You can see they're kind of working in tandem there with the mini excavator and the larger excavator, pulling them out of the dam face and then scraping them up and put them in the dump truck. So here's some great drone footage that Kelly Gerkensmeyer took of the work effort. Just really, really cool images showing the work effort. That work continues this week and it'll continue through next week. And then we should be done. You can get a little better idea of the image on the right of the kind of the outcropping of tules, and then right behind it is the spillway. So they're actually working towards that direction, and then they're going to clean that spillway out.
Your feet is White Pine.
Oh, that's a good question.
I want to say 100. 150.
I think,
Yeah, that was probably what it was initially.
Yeah.
It's probably significantly less than that now.
yeah. And then I think we had, you guys have already seen it, the jig is up, but here we are, right?
Oh.
So this is kind of, you can see the little happy faces in the image here if you look closely, but this is a tank in the Jenny Lind service area off of over there in La Quintana area. And what the little happy faces are transducer floats. So in this image here at a tank, you can see kind of a little bit better picture on the right. There's an open hatch at the very top of the tank. And the stainless steel tubes with a circle on the bottom are the transducers. So there's this vortexing that happens in a tank, and the water kind of swirls under periods of heavy demand. And if you don't have weights on the transducer, you get wonky level readings in the tank, and you can turn pumps on and turn pumps off based on tank level. So we put the weights on the transducer to keep it from moving, and they just happen to look like little people.
You didn't put the smile part.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Very
Yeah.
interesting.
The eyes are screwed.
I'd like to put in a request to go
Yeah,
on
Philip
the
said.
dam the
Yeah.
next time.
Okay.
Could I?
Yeah, we can coordinate that for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
You want to drive
that'd be
the
fun.
excavator?
Pardon?
Yeah, we can let you drive the excavator if you want.
Oh, yeah. Oh, well,
From the bucket truck.
We-
Remotely from the bucket.
We go back to that spillway at,
Yeah.
I was just telling Bertha, when I was a kid, my mom and another lady or simple families, we used to go to that, we used to slide down it with, we had to couldn't wear swimsuits. We had to wear Levi's, otherwise you'd wear right through your pants. We spent hours
Yeah,
going up and
Going
down.
back and
up
forth,
down that
back,
spillway.
yeah.
That's really cool. That's really cool.
And now you can't even get in there.
No, Fort Knox.
That's where the graffiti came from.
It'll be nice and smooth when they're done, but it'll be Fort Knox too.
Oh, this is beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
But the
White Pine is.
large excavator, that's a CCWD asset?
That is not, that's a rented piece of equipment.
Oh, no, I'm sure we have to buy one soon.
We would love to buy one. We actually asked for one last fiscal, but such is life.
I had a couple of questions for you,
Yeah.
please. I was looking at the water production and that's quite from
So-
summer down to September.
So it's
Wow, what
the
a-
lowest district-wide, overall production in 7 years. Yeah. And so,
Ay, ay, ay.
I mean, we're in the midst of drought. We're at stage 2 conservation. And
Oh, that, yeah.
And I think people's, as we've talked about this, and I think Michael's talked about this multiple times, the way people are using water has changed.
Right.
And so this is just a reflection of that. But you can see in 2021, we were actually kind of back up and above most of the years that Jesse depicts on the diagram. So we'll continue to monitor and report out monthly and let you all know how production's looking.
Yeah, pictures and graphs work.
Yeah.
Okay,
But you talk about, excuse me, Bertha, but you talk about the repairs that you've been making on supply lines and stuff. And that has to have a very significant influence on water demand.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and it's just, we can't work the underground crew long enough. I mean, the work they're doing is really important in that regard. Great crew.
Very
by the way.
good.
Yeah.
my second question was, of course, we're seeing the pictures of the bucket truck. Do we maintain usage of all of our equipment, right?
Absolutely. Yep,
Mhm.
absolutely.
And so,
So generally between the mechanical crew and our purchasing agent, we monitor what equipment is ready for service, what equipment has issues or needs to be maintained, and then we coordinate if our mechanical crew is going to do the work. Generally, if it's a service truck, set aside the enterprise vehicles because those have a maintenance agreement with them that we send those in for oil changes and routine work. But if it's our truck, we will make a determination on whether or not staff have the time and the availability and skill to do the work, or we'll send it out. And that's usually between the mechanics and the purchasing agent. The purchasing agent will coordinate the effort. And then when it comes to equipment, we have the construction crew maintains their own equipment, so they'll service their equipment, grease their excavators and backhoes, and then the mechanical crew will manage the rest of the equipment. And then they also work together if either of them are too busy or they have a project or they're short-staffed for whatever reason, they'll work together to get maintenance done on their equipment.
Okay, my last thing was on the underground and your point number 11. We are now beginning to mobilize our equipment back to Valley Springs. Is that
So they're there now, yeah.
because
Yep.
winter's coming up the hill? Is that?
Yeah, and we don't have, frankly, we don't have as many service laterals on the list. So what'll generally happen is, you know, if we have a leak in Ebbets Pass and then the distribution crew determines we need to replace this service lateral, it'll go on a list. And then when they get enough on the pass, then we'll schedule time for the underground crew to go up to the pass and knock those out. And generally what they can do is they can fix 8 of them, fix 10 of them, and then go back to either Copper or Rancho. Rancho is always the default, Jenny Lynn service area, and then Copperopolis is next. We've been trying to coordinate with Poker Flat. HOA has been great. We have service laterals that need replacement in that HOA, but PG&E, working with PG&E is challenging because if you all recall, all of our infrastructure is right next to itself in the common trench. And so we need to coordinate with them, and we're working with PG&E and through our engineering department in Mazingo with our Copper Cove lift station rehab project to hopefully ideally get into that HOA once, replace service laterals, and also work to do the lift station improvements project. So there's going to be some coordination there. So while all that coordination takes place, they're back to Rancho Calaveras, Jenny Lynn service area to replace services.
So Mazingo did get that 1,800 feet of piping in Overland's Ferry. Have they demobilized then? Are they starting to work on the pump stations?
They're going to come back to work on the pump stations in December. So they're working with,
December, you said?
yeah, at the end of December. So they're working with Poker Flat HOA to have some material and equipment stored within the HOA. And there were some cleanup items that they had to complete associated with that. And then they're going to not essentially demob, just basically pause. Material and equipment are there. And then they're going to go finish up some of their other projects and then come back at the end of December.
Very good.
I remember when Mazingo was working up on the pass,
That's right.
that they sort of just demobilized without telling anybody for a month or two, but so.
Yeah, that was a unique set of circumstances, and we've had several other projects with them where that hasn't been an issue.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, anybody have questions for Damon?
Good job.
All right,
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Really good.
Thanks for explaining those smiley faces.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah, we all were talking about that.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Damon. Michael, General Manager's report.
All right, I'll try to get through this list pretty quickly. Attended a good meeting with Congressman McClintock this morning with some Copperopolis community members and covered a range of issues there, but had the opportunity to thank him for supporting our funding requests for Army Corps funding for the copper wastewater facilities. So we are moving forward with trying to secure additional funds, and his support is critical to that effort. The water, wildfire, and wine event. This is, I guess, the last board meeting where you'll hear me promote it because it's happening next Thursday finally.
Nice.
And I'm really excited about it. I think it's gonna be even better than we had hoped. We have fantastic speakers. Damon is gonna be moderating a panel, and you already know how great of a public speaker he is. Great people on that panel, including John Osborne with Calaveras OES, who I think is gonna be a good addition to that. Because we have water agency folks, but also the emergency services side.
What kind of RSVP have you gotten?
Really good. We were I think Aqua was saying, they hope for around 50 people for these types of events, and we're over 75. And there's still time to register this week, so we'll see where we end up. The biomass panel, I think, is going to be fantastic. Sandra Hess has secured, she's going to kind of moderate a keynote discussion with a couple of Calaveras Wine Grape Alliance members, Stuart Mass, and I'm blanking on the owner of Aloria Vineyards. Sorry about that, but she'll be there too. So I think that the Aqua program will be great. The Mountain County's reception that evening, I think, is going to also be fantastic. Almost everybody that has registered for the Aqua event has also RSVP'd for the Mountain County's reception at the hotel. Hinter House has come up with a recipe for a CCWD signature cocktail.
Yeah.
That will be available.
You're all excited about that one.
Well, their spirits are made with CCWD water.
Oh, nice.
Bourbon is aged in local barrels from local wineries. So I think it's just a very nice symmetry there. So it's going to be a great event. As Damon showed you some pictures, we have a customer on the slurry line, the first one ever. So we're really excited about that. Also had some really productive discussions with Summer Nicotero at UPUD about how to bring on more customers that are in UPUD service territory. So obviously that's it's always a kind of a complicated question when there's multiple agencies serving within the same service areas. That's an issue we need to resolve with them. But those discussions are productive at this point. On Monday, I was on a tour with Director Underhill, current Supervisor Callaway, and incoming Supervisor Hubbardie for the Ebbets Pass supervisorial district. We took them to the tunnel tap, took them to Hunter's Dam, took them to our water treatment plant and our wastewater treatment plant in Arnold. Spent a couple hours with them, and it was, I think, a really positive afternoon. Going back to Friday, the annual East Bay Mud Party barbecue was a great event, well attended. I think had some great got to catch up with some folks that we hadn't seen in a while. So really positive positive meeting there. And then we had legal affairs last week also. And one of the things I mentioned, because there's the UMRA meeting right before the East Bay Mud barbecue. And one of the things I pointed out at the UMRA meeting was we talked about at legal affairs, which was the governor vetoed AB 1717, which was the prevailing wage for forest management work, which we were strongly opposed to. And it was a surprise, first of all, because it's how it had sailed through the legislature and had strong backing from the unions, and that kind of deterred a lot of opposition to it. But we were a very active member of a coalition of water agencies and other entities that were very, very opposed to the bill. And I like, we're a small agency, obviously, but I like to think that coalition had an impact in this case where, the governor might have needed some cover or some help to issue that veto. I know the state agencies that are involved in forest management were also opposed to the bill. So I suspect that's probably the larger reason why he was willing to veto it. But to have water agencies and other stakeholders also, very vocally expressing our opposition as to why it was just a bad bill, bad policy, I think helped. So congratulations to the board for helping to craft state policy and opposing that bill. He also vetoed SB 222, which was, we talked a little bit earlier about low income ratepayer assistance. And that was one we were also opposed to, while like Aqua, kind of generally support that concept depending on how it's done and how it's funded. And there were a lot of questions that were unanswered and amendments that weren't added in the legislative process. So we were happy to see SB 222 vetoed also. The couple of other, I'll just mention briefly, so glad to see folks from Copperopolis here again. That at the EPOC meeting, we've been having discussions with folks down in Copper for a couple of years now about trying to encourage a group similar or along the lines of the Evans Pass Property Owners Coalition. And there was a good contingent from Concord that attended the EPOC meeting last week, 2 weeks ago. And so hoping that that continues to develop, and it'd be great to have an organization like that. Really helps our public outreach efforts. And so hopefully that can happen in Copper. Couple of things to look forward to. We'll be bringing back, we've been working with the unions and on updating our technology use policy. I would expect to see that probably at the next board meeting, along with a grant. The Sierra Nevada Conservancy's awarding grants for forest management work. The CalAm team that we've worked with in the past, Pat McGreevy and Jan Bray, have developed another project that includes CCWD land. We're really grateful for them for doing all the legwork, and we step in as the fiscal agent. We can help move these projects forward. So there's another grant in the Moak watershed that they're working on. That will probably be on the next board agenda. We've been talking to a developer and the financing authority for an infrastructure funding program called the BOLD program. I can't remember what the acronym stands for, but it's a way for developers to pre-fund infrastructure expenses and help move projects forward. Jeff has been doing a lot of research along with other members of our staff, and we've met with those groups over the last few weeks. Might be something we bring to the finance committee first to give a more detailed update on what exactly the program is, what our role in it would be. But I think it's something that we're really optimistic about. So hopefully we can work with developers on a funding mechanism that helps move some projects forward. I think that's all I had. Any questions?
Good. All right, thank you. Board reports, I think is where we're at. Russ?
I think I've spoken enough today, so I have
You're good?
nothing to report.
All right, Jeff?
Nothing to report.
Scott?
Two things quick. Piggyback on a couple things that Michael brought up. The Mountain County / Aqua event next week. The following morning on Friday, Mountain Counties will have our, I think every other month we're meeting now. So we're going to be meeting that morning in Murphy's. And then last week we did have our legal affairs meeting, and we decided that we wouldn't be taking a visit to Washington, D.C. this year, but we'd be having virtual visits with our D.C. Legislative people, as well as the maybe possibly the Pentagon, Army Corps engineers. That'll take place on Monday, November 14th and Tuesday, the 15th. That's all I got.
And that'll be virtual or?
Those will be virtual.
Can we attend that virtual?
Yeah.
I'd like to do that if I can.
We limit that to less than 40 minutes. So the affairs committee could not have four.
No, we can't, Cindy.
Well, I don't like that, no.
They're typically really small groups with a short period of time where we try to.
Could we just listen and be muted so we can't?
No,
talk?
you can't.
Not without a right.
We could take one of them, we could arrange for you to have a pickup failure or something on your way. So.
We could.
I'll be Arkansas. That'd be weird.
I just would like to see it sometime because they're not going to go to DC, but they'll be doing something remotely, or just like they would if they were there, right?
Yeah,
Sort
it ends up being a little bit different than when we actually go.
I think it's a lot different. A Zoom
Oh,
meeting.
yeah.
It's a Zoom meeting. It's a Zoom meeting for 10 minutes.
Okay. All right.
They're really, really valuable meetings, and I think we are
Yeah.
looking forward to being able to do those in person again, when we get the opportunity. Definitely.
Yeah. Jeff really likes them.
I'd like to go sometime in the next 4 years. Okay, I've got it, Scott.
You did?
Yeah, that's all I got.
Thank you. Bertha?
Oh, yeah.
That's a good.
Okay, I have a,
Used to be.
suggestion for a new title for Stacy from Human Resources. We want to call her the Chief People and Cultural Officer. Wouldn't that be great?
No.
Let's.
Did you talk to Stacy about this?
That's just. Well, we want to be contemporary. Okay, and then just again, or Michael mentioned the tour that we had at the treatment plants. And so that was really nice because the weather was great. But I've never really, I hadn't spent much time with Martin. Well, with Marita, of course, saying goodbye, but with Martin, and he asked some very, very intelligent, pertinent questions of Michael. And I just do want to say I hadn't ever been with Michael for 2 hours straight where he talked about, you haven't, about the water.
He does that here almost every other
No,
Wednesday.
no, not to the degree that he did on Monday. And I was very, very impressed. You should be a GM. It was really.
Glad to hear you're about how you were going.
Yeah. Huh? No. You like what you do, you know?
You gave another opening. Listen, here we go.
Coordination of that, and Scott, we stuck around. I think that was after his shift. Scott Lunsberg, our fantastic, super experienced 25-year treatment plant operator up on the pass, who gave a much better tour of the actual treatment. Grateful to those guys for
Yeah, no, it was very, very well received. And I just, as I say, Martin will be okay.
Very good. Is that it? Okay, I just want to say that I did a tour with the UWPA. They had a small tour. It started at Hunter's Camp. I hadn't been there before, so I got to see our bypass pipe or whatever that's called. And also went out to the 3/4 mile flume and walked the flume, about 400 feet. That was interesting. And anyhow, just a good presentation. I know they're working on that and they showed it to us as a sample. And I think some of you have seen it, that draft presentation they're putting up to do customer outreach to learn about the water along the Highway 4. And they did make adjustments to add CCWD. Did you know that? Yeah. Yeah, they added in there.
The video, you mean?
Yeah, I mean, not a lot, but it does say that the three of them got together to form UWPA. So that was nice. And I'm just kind of curious, can anybody tell me exactly why CCWD pulled out? Does anybody have that info, or do we not talk about it? Anybody know?
Why we pulled out of UPA?
Yeah, UWPA. Pardon me?
It coincided with there's a lot more to that would have to be kind of a separately agendized item, but it was at least it coincided in time with when you could pay CCWD back for the initial loan that was used to purchase the system.
And you were on the board then, so
Yeah.
it was
One of my
just.
Great accomplishments.
Well, can you just tell me in a couple sentences or less,
Yeah, I can.
but not now?
Not at this session, yes.
Okay.
And we have to bring back Charlie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so no answer on that, but that's okay. Thank you for the laptop, and you'll send us a policy and what we can and can't do with these things.
Yeah.
And I mean, some of it is obvious, duh. But yeah, very nice, thank you. And did you plan on us being able to use them here and we can have our agenda up?
So because it's a district issued device, when you open it, it should connect to the Wi-Fi.
It did,
automatically.
yeah.
And it'll be something the district can support. It's a lot of advantages to have.
Would we be able to like dial into the meeting muted, obviously, just so in case there's some other presentation that you don't see very well on the screen, I can look at it here? That's what I was kind of hoping to get out of it sometime.
That's-
Yeah, so, so next meeting you can help me with that. Cool.
Well, no, one thing I'm doing, I already asked Rebecca, she doesn't, don't send me the agenda anymore, so save on printing and,
Exact, well,
and postage.
yeah, and I'm good with that too. And then I'll just print usually the pages that I need that I have notes on usually. So, woo-hoo, yeah, we can save some.
We have
that
an
way.
instruction manual on it.
What? You shouldn't be asking that, no.
I don't know that you'll have an instruction. We can give you like the manual.
A tutorial.
Laptop.
That's what I meant. Yeah,
Yeah.
but that won't tell you anything.
Yeah, those are usually.
That won't tell you anything. You need your instructions on
Well,
Outlook. or
okay, then I'll
whatever.
just take, what's his name home with me.
And then,
It's gonna start a.
for Michael,
Which one?
for a future agenda item, and I want to, be able to hear some things regarding the Copperopolis and what's it called? The biomass plant. I know it's conceptual, but is CCWD, do they have any kind of budget plan for that to even discuss it? Or is this strictly just accounting project?
Either.
Okay, so,
Private company.
Right. If that moves forward, it would be the private developer that.
okay, I was at that town hall meeting and perhaps you want to agendize it. I would like it agendized. Just because I think, and I know that you say it's conceptual and I understand that, but if somebody is doing all the environmental work and doing, so what all they are.
That's the hard part about that is, and I think what we talked about last time, we talked about if there's anything to report on the development of a project, we could bring it back at that time. We could bring it back and just discuss it in general.
I wouldn't mind just so let's get, if nothing else, correct information out there if that's what has to happen. Okay. All right, anybody else have anything for agenda items? Nope. All right, next board meeting is Wednesday, October 26th and Wednesday, November 9th. And if there's nothing else, we'll adjourn the meeting. And it's 3:17 or 18.